Category 3 Hurricane Dorian is slowly getting closer to Florida. The storm has stalled about 100 miles off the coast after wreaking havoc on the Bahamas Monday. At least 5 people were killed when it hit the islands as a Category 5. Sustained winds of 185 miles per hour and heavy rains hurled cars, ripped off roofs, and unleashed massive flooding. The Bahamian Prime Minister has called it a historic tragedy. Now, more than 4 million people on the east coast of Florida have been ordered to evacuate. Experts say a storm surge of 4 to 7 feet is possible all the way through from North to South Carolina. Although the storm is weakening, it is expected to remain powerful for the next few days.
So CBS News climate change and weather contributor Jeff Berardelli is here to give us more insight on this storm. It's basically been sitting there over the Bahamas. It's not moving very fast.
Yeah.
So, why is it slowed down, and kind of what can we expect in the coming hours, I guess?
Well, first of all, the steering currents in the atmosphere have been really weak for the past couple of days. It had a definite path. It was moving in one definite direction. And then all of a sudden, everything broke down. We had a ridge of high pressure that was steering it. It broke in 2 pieces, and it opened up a corridor to its north, but the storm entered no man's land. And so it got stuck, and it's been in almost exactly the same spot for 24 hours, lashing the Bahamas. The only good news is it's continuing to weaken. Winds are 115 now, so it's a Cat 3. Remember, when it came in, it was 185. This is a marked change, but it's still a very dangerous storm, and it's only moving at 1 mile an hour. That will change today. It will begin to move to the north today. The reason why it's weakening is it's sitting over its own water, and it's using up all its energy. Water temperatures have gone down around 6 degrees over the past 2 days because it's sucking in all the energy and dropping all that rain.
Wow.
Yeah.
Jeff, while you're here, let's get you to weigh in on your expertise, which is climate change. You've been studying that for quite some time, and there's an opinion piece in the New York Times which says that, throughout the coverage of all these hurricanes that have happened over the last couple of years, news coverage from politicians, climate change very rarely gets mentioned.
Right.
There's a really startling statistic that he points out here, Dave Leonhardt, who wrote this piece for the New York Times. From the 1960s through the 1990s, a typical year had only 1 severe hurricane. In this century, the average number has roughly doubled. What's going on here?
All right, so let me tell you. Over the past 169 years, there have been 35 Category 5 hurricanes. If you do the math on that, there's a 20% chance in any given year of a Category 5. In the past 4 years, we've had 5 Category 5s. The chance of that happening is less than 1%. Actually, it's 0.20, so about a 20th of a percent, or not quite a 20th, but a 1/5 of a percent. So that's very low, the chances of it happening. That's because water temperatures are warming. So it's kind of loading the dice. There are warmer temperatures that is higher octane fuel. It's making these storms stronger. There is plenty of proof that it's happening. A 2013 study says that for every degree Celsius of warming, so 1.8 degrees Fahrenheit of warming, we see an increase of 25 to 30% in the proportion of Category 4s and Category 5s. So there is research backing that hurricanes are in fact getting stronger, and all signs point to the future that we're going to see an increased likelihood of Atlantic hurricanes being Cat 4s and Cat 5s. In fact, the increase in a study last year from the Geophysical Fluid Dynamics Laboratory in Princeton, New Jersey, was a 135% increase in Cat 5s in the Atlantic Basin in the future, so later in this century.
Can you correlate sort of the strength with the temperature rising? What I'm really asking is, could we see a Cat 6? I mean, if the temperatures continue to rise?
There's some debate about whether or not there should be a Cat 6. A lot of meteorologists say, why bother? Because Category 5s are already catastrophic. We saw what happened in the Bahamas. Anything stronger than that is just going to do the same type of damage, although I would argue that it is worse damage the worse it gets. This is a crazy statistic. If you have a storm with winds of 75 miles an hour, and a storm with winds of 185 miles an hour, you might take a guess at how much more damage potential there is. You might think it's twice, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times. It's not. It's 1,371 times more damage potential. 1,371 when you take a storm from 75-mile-an-hour winds and you make it 185-mile-an-hour winds.
Wow.
So that seems to be kind of an interesting point, too, which is scientists aren't suggesting that climate change and warming waters are contributing to the frequency of hurricanes, but they are making the winds stronger.
That's exactly right.
And they're making them wetter.
That's very true. So storms will be wetter, but there may not be more of them. In fact, there's a chance there may be a few less, but the intensity of these storms gets stronger. They also slow down in the coastal plain, and because atmospheric temperatures are warmer, it stores more moisture, it drops more rain. So in Harvey, the estimate was somewhere between 15 to 35% of the rainfall was caused by climate change. So instead of 40 inches of rain, there was 60 inches of rain, or instead of 48 inches of rain, there was 60 inches.
So then as we see this hurricane sort of moving on towards the coast, as I understand it, it's not going to take a direct hit, or, it's not going to land in the U.S., but there's still a concern, I presume, about water when you're talking about this Cat 5 storm that's picking up its own water over and over again. That's a lot of water to dump somewhere.
Right, so there's likely going to be about 3 to 5 feet of storm surge up and down the coast. Maybe a little bit more in the Carolinas because it could actually make landfall sometime around the Thursday timeframe. So they may see a little bit more storm surge. Also, wind gusts around Cape Canaveral, probably up to around 70 miles an hour, so close to hurricane force. You can see how warm the water is. Notice under the storm how the temperature has cooled tremendously. But north of that, 88, 89 degrees in the Gulf Stream, so it could re-strengthen for about 6 or 12 hours. It'll weaken by the time it gets to North Carolina. That is where we expect the possibility of landfall, Wilmington up to around Cape Hatteras. At that point, we'll probably see some storm surge that exceeds the 3 to 5. Maybe it's as high as 5 to 7 or so. Those are the wind speeds. You can see that the hurricane force winds are in the red, and we don't expect it to get much closer to land. However, in the orange, that's where we have winds that are about 60 miles an hour, gusting to 75, 80. So along the coast, that's the kind of wind we can expect as it makes its way north. The best chance for hurricane force winds anywhere from Charleston, South Carolina, up to Myrtle Beach, up to around Morehead City, up to Cape Hatteras before it moves out on Friday.
The other, I guess, final point I want to make about, or get your take on, is we talked about the warming waters, the effect of climate change on the intensity of some of these storms, and then you couple that with sort of the infrastructure. In other words, what we saw in 2017 with Harvey, Irma, and Maria in Houston, for example, which was a particular landmass that maybe 50 or 100 years ago might have been able to sustain a direct hit like it took, but because of deforestation and other things, I mean, I get it, people have to live somewhere, you saw a greater devastation.
Right, so it was marshland, and marshland is good for absorbing water, right, because that's what it is. But it's all paved over completely. There's nowhere for the water to go. So we have to come up with solutions to kind of funnel this water into places, where it can be stored rather than into people's homes.
Really good stuff.
Yeah, we should have you on just to talk more about that, because it's really fascinating stuff. Jeff, thank you so much.
You're welcome.